Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of the ECOMsquare Overshare, where we're exploring e-commerce together. And today we're talking about the founder's journey, and especially when that journey gets hard. So we're talking about the dark times and the low moments. Joining me today, I have two e-commerce founders. First, we have Nicole Murphy, who is the founder and CEO of tallsize.com, which is an online fashion marketplace. Hello, Nicole. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. So you are the one that actually provided the impetus for this episode to even happen. You shouted out into the void of social media to find something that you could not find. So why don't you help set us up a little bit? What were you looking for? What caused you to reach out?
Yeah, I think it's just, so we're about a year into our business, and it's tough. It's a grind early days, right? And I think I found myself, I'm always listening to podcasts of other founder stories and just the journey, right, from various founders. But I think like one thing I was craving is it was always success stories. It was always like a quick little tidbit about like, yeah, it was hard in the beginning, but like now we're this massive company and everything's great and whatever, right? And so there's a lot of success stories. But I think because of where we are at in our business, it was I was just craving some dark stories, just so that I didn't feel so alone in the grind that is starting up a new e-commerce company, especially in today's day and age. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, totally cool. And then I saw that post on LinkedIn that you put out there, and as part of the team at ECOMsquare, which is an e-commerce-specific co-working space in Vancouver. Where really we believe that bringing like-minded people together in a community of a shared experience, flat hierarchy, is a great way for everyone in that community to share in, learning and growth. So I saw your call for help. I thought, let's try to find some community for you. So we went into the ECOMsquare Rolodex, came up with someone who I think is perfectly suited to the conversation, who is our other guest joining us today. He is Rob Fraser, the founder and CEO of Outway Socks. Coming up on your 6-year anniversary as a company pretty soon here. So welcome, Rob. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat today. And I agree. These are stories that need to be told, and be fun to share.
Yeah, totally. It's such a thing with social media. Everyone's talked about it a million times about how, you only see the sanitized, the best version of everybody and everything. So when you're going out there trying to find some help, especially, it can be really demoralizing. So I want to start with Nicole. So you reached out, you wanted these conversations of some darker times. How do you deal with that kind of thing? What was going on that sort of made you seek that out? Can you talk about like specifically what was happening?
Yeah, I think like in our stage of our business right now, it's like we know we're onto something. We're getting all the feedback, all the signs, all the data telling us that. And I think the dark moment, I guess, if you will, is I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, how the hell do people build their businesses in the early days with no money? Like, we are completely bootstrapped. We've invested some of our own like personal life savings, but there's not like a huge influx of capital that we can use to tap into, right? And so I think when you see a lot of these success stories of all these companies raising all this funding and doing all these amazing things, it's like, okay, that's cool because you have the funding or you wanted the funding and whatever, you went for that. But like, what are some more like practical ways of like, what was it actually like in the early days? Were people dumping their whole life savings into it? And like, what did that feel like? Like, how scary is that, right? Because I think those are some feelings that come up as founders that you feel really alone, right? Because it's scary to do things like that. And so I think just I was craving conversation from others who are in it or who actually spend time reflecting on what that really was before they had their big unlock, whether it's funding or whatever it ends up being. But that's really kind of what I guess the headspace I was in. I was like, oh, there's so much I want to do, but was getting really frustrated on the like early stage funding situation.
Yeah, there's just so much out there that you could do. Maybe Rob, if you could think back to early days of Outway at that time, Endure, and sort of maybe if that came up for you and how you might have dealt with it.
Yeah, so we were bootstrapped as well for 5 years. We raised money in the fall of last year, but bootstrapped to, multi 8 figures in sales before raising money. So had to kind of go through the same dark times of like, how do we fund this thing and where's the money going to come from? And when I started the business, I was in school and in student debt and had no money. So to initially fund it, I put in $1,000 from school loans, which basically meant that I wouldn't be able to eat as much that week, or like go out on the weekend or whatever. And then as I needed more money for living, because of course you're not paying yourself, I basically tried to start selling things I owned. And I've talked about on other podcasts, but previous to like starting a business, I was a competitive elite cyclist. So I had a bunch of bikes that I really loved to ride. But I sold them all. So I sold them all to like basically live, right? And so that's maybe one of the dark sides, is that basically for almost like 3 or 4 years until I could afford to buy bikes again. And luckily that the business did well and I could buy bikes again, but I basically couldn't even do what I love to do. I couldn't go ride my bike anymore. People always ask me, do you still ride bikes? Like, no, I sold them, like I had like 3 or 4 at the time, like, but they were expensive bikes. That's how I could basically, fund myself and basically live while I'm putting everything I have into the business. And I was also working on top of going to school and starting the business. I was working like a few different jobs, like part-time stuff, just to generate more income, because I live in Victoria, BC, and it's not cheap to live here. And my student loans that I got just covered the actual school. It didn't cover like living. I didn't have like the qualifications, I guess, to get more than that. So anyways, yeah, like luckily though, early on, kind of like stumbled into a way to use our business model to actually generate additional income by creating white label products for other brands. So like we sell socks, and then one of my old sponsors from cycling said, "Oh, I see you're making socks now. Could you make them for our brand?" And it was kind of like a light bulb moment of like, I guess I could, and the benefit of that model was it was cash up front, and then we would produce and ship. So it generated a lot of free cash flow, and there wasn't an inventory risk. So that's really how we funded the company in the early days. So what I tell like early founders earlier in their journey is I always say, like, is there other ways you can use the business you've created and then generate additional income streams? If there's ways of like just doing different iterations of that business model. And for us, it was, well, we became experts at making a product and other people needed the product. And can you find a way to do, like a white label version or something else that doesn't devalue the core brand, which is obviously super important. But that was how we generated cash flow in the early days. Otherwise, there was no way we would have been able to bootstrap to like the 10 million mark. It's just the inventory demands and marketing demands to front load the growth are just way too high.
How long did you go before you started actually like paying yourself? Because I think that's the other struggle too, is like, especially for my story anyways, is like, I come from the tech space where I was making really good money, and like I believe in this business so much, so I kind of like made that jump, right? And doing consulting to like pay my bills and not have to dip into my savings quite as much. But I think the other just like big question mark to me is like, how long do people actually go before they like start paying themselves? Or like, at what point did you make that decision that you wanted to kind of not siphon all the money back into the business, but start being able to pay yourself as a founder?
Yeah, that's like something I think that's going to vary based on each person. So luckily, so in our first year, we ended up doing like $350,000 in sales. So it started to do pretty well, and we kept the operation super lean, and we were quite profitable. So like luckily, in my case, we were actually I was able to pay myself like $36,000 a year. It's like $3,000 a month, basically, before tax. So like really not a lot, after taxes come off. So, and that was basically just to stay alive. I think the push and pull here though is like a lot of founders think that like, and I've come to like evolve to this line of thinking, but a lot of founders think I need to put every dollar into the business, but your like sanity and quality of living, I'm not saying be extravagant, you are the product as well. You're like the most important thing in the business as a founder in the early days. And if you're not optimized, if you're like going to bed hungry, or if you're like really stressed and not functioning at a decent level, then I would kind of question whether or not you're making the investment in yourself as well. Like you are a part of the business. So I don't think people need to look at like paying themselves as an extravagance. Like 36 grand is not a lot of money, but it put food on the table, and like you need to eat. And my other way of looking at this is entrepreneurship is like a sport, and you have to treat yourself like an athlete. And part of that is like you need to be able to give yourself time to exercise. You need to give yourself time to rest. You need to make sure you're eating quality food, because these things are all important. And business is so difficult that if you're not doing these things, the path to burnout is much shorter than if you were to be taking care of yourself. And so I think that's probably like, however, you need the money to be able to pay yourself. So like there's that push and pull. I would just say, like, if there needs to be a point in which that you're making some money that you want to be taking a little bit out, because you have to recognize that like an investment in yourself as the founder is equally as important as an investment into marketing channels or more product development, because you are literally basically doing everything. Like, and if you're not functioning at the highest level, then I would always kind of push back on a founder and be like, well, then like, is your business really going to make it? You know, like, cause like, I think a lot of startups and founders and business, the first few years, it's like really the success is just on the grit and kind of like of the founder. Like, are they willing to keep going and roll with the punches? It's not generally their genius or generally the product or anything like that in the early days. It's really, can you stay alive long enough to make sense what you're doing? And once you do, then you can actually start to grow. And that's usually about 2 years, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you touched on like self-care there a little bit, which I would like to talk about. You talked about sort of the basics of eating, sleeping, you know, hopefully Nicole, you're getting that done. And then moving on to sort of your mental state. Do you remember sort of things that you felt were really important, maybe beyond those basic necessities of health, that really helped you get in the right mindset and stay in the right mindset?
Yeah, I wasn't probably the best at it, honestly. Like, I was pretty like, I came from like the professional athlete world, so like pretty hard charging and did take a lot of downtime. I'd say like the thing that actually caused me the most like stress and kind of like mental issues, honestly, was like I had a co-founder that just wasn't the right fit for me. Like when we started the business, I started with a friend in college, and we didn't really expect it to work. You know, like I knew I was going to go and try my best, but like I had never started a business before. And it was really just something to do well in school to keep myself busy. Cause like I wasn't satisfied with like normal life after being an athlete for so long. I was just like, school's boring. I want to like try something really big. And so I was like, oh, this would be more fun with a friend. And so like, I'd say like my story is not as important as kind of the message, which is like in those early days, surrounding yourself with people that you can really like get into the trenches with. And luckily at that time I had my girlfriend, now wife. And so she was super helpful and like kind of like being able just to chat through things or whatever. Cause like, you know, what Nicole mentioned early on here is that like, it's a very lonely journey as a founder. Like, yeah, there's other people building businesses, but in the early days of your business, it's like, you're trying to create something new that hasn't previously existed. And so your problems, although have like, there's some similar things and probably what I'm talking about right now, Nicole's had the same feelings. However, it's like, you know, the buck stops with you, and like you have to ultimately figure out all these different things that are quite unique to your business and that are really unique problems to you. So you can get lonely. So I'd say like, I didn't have the right co-founder and partner in the business. So that caused a lot of trouble. I just felt overworked and there was just a lot of tension. Like I mentioned, like I had to sell everything to stay alive and could only take so much money out of the business. Well, like I had a co-founder that was living at home and didn't have any expenses, making the same amount of money. And so like, then also wasn't doing the work. And so that caused a lot of resentment on my part, because I was like, I'm already doing everything. I could make double the money because like this, I have someone else who's not struggling as hard as I am. You know, he was 5 years younger than me and I wasn't from Victoria. So I was paying rent and groceries, and it's just kind of like, you know, in that same period where I'm like literally in debt year over year, he bought a truck. You know, it's like, this sucks. This really sucks. And so like, those were the other parts of like, where I was just like, what's the point? And that ultimately ended up in me being like, I'm walking away or buying my co-founder out, because it's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So that was like, and this is not an uncommon thing in business, unfortunately. It's like people start businesses because a lot of people ask themselves like, what happens if it goes wrong? And they optimize for minimizing risk, but don't ask themselves what happens if this goes right. And I think that's something really important, because that's almost the worst situation to be in, that if something's working and you didn't think through how to capitalize on it, you'd actually have a lot more regret than if you know, like, I think there's two sides of regret. Maybe there's the regret of not ever trying, and then maybe trying, but not having a plan if it works. It's like, there's like no real in between there. So, unfortunately, I didn't really ask myself thoroughly or think through like, what happens if this works, even though I truly thought it could. And so, yeah, that was probably what caused a lot of issue. The actual work itself and like the struggle and stuff. Like I came from a 10-year background of dealing with a lot of adversity, and professional sports, not easy. And there's a lot of ups and downs. And so like I built kind of a lot of kind of mental strength in that area, but it was what was new for me was kind of like dealing with a partner that wasn't pulling their weight and all of that side of things. So the long-winded answer there is making sure you have the right people in your corner with the same values and motivations, and that it's vetted. It's truly like a marriage for co-founder relationships. And if you have the wrong dynamic there, it's one of the key reasons that startups fail.
Mm-hmm. I've also noticed myself, like beyond my co-founders, but even just forming relationships with other, in my case, particularly female founders who are kind of at a similar stage as me, has kind of also helped this whole like not feeling so alone and not being like, what the heck is that? Like, what is this journey? It's wild, right? So I think that's actually been really helpful for me, is just like expanding that network of people who are on the ground figuring out this stuff as much as I am, right? Not to mention, like, there's obviously like the support component of that, but also just learning from each other, right? Like they might make a mistake that could save me that mistake just by being surrounded by people like that. So I like that you said that, because that's like a recent realization for me, I would say, in the last month or two, of how incredibly important that is. Because I think before that, like a lot of my friends and even my family, like they don't get it, right? They don't get why, like, why, they're like, why are you doing this? Why don't you you had a great job, like just keep working the job. And so I found that also quite isolating. So it's been good just finding people who get it, and are kind of down there with you.
Totally. And I think that community is out there. If you're an early stage, you might not be able to bring on that employee, the in-house sort of community that you might have. So yeah, great to find some other people.
I just wanted to ask Rob a question. You said about like balance, and as founders, you're like one of the most important assets to the business, invest in self-care and all of that kind of stuff. So I would say, like, generally speaking, as a human, I get my 8 hours of sleep, I eat well, I exercise. But I do find myself thinking about my business all the time. And I feel to the point where I'm like, I need some more hobbies or something. Like I need something to get my mind off of it a little bit, because it's almost like I'm so passionate about what we're building that I'm thinking about it every waking hour of the day. And I almost wish that I had a bit of an outlet, or something to kind of just like distract my mind. And I don't know if, Rob, you went through that, or if you have any learnings on your side of how you do think about things other than building your business, to get some mental rest and some better balance on that front.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of the curse of entrepreneurship. Like there's not much of a way to get out of that. I think that I don't like believe in balance for entrepreneurs so much as I do like synergies. So like finding things that like allow you to still kind of work on your business, but like maybe it's context shifting. So like I'll go for a run or a bike ride and my mind will drift and I'll still think about business, but it's a little more of like the creative side of it, the things that give me energy. Yeah. I think it's just a question of asking yourself, like, what parts of your business and thinking about the business give you energy and what parts take away the energy. And then optimizing for, in the downtime, at least only focusing on the things that seem to kind of fill your cup and give you energy. And just turn off the negative thoughts. It's like, if you don't want it, if you love what you're doing, like I would say, like there's probably zero downside to thinking about it then. Just like in the times where you're not working or at the desk or like plugged in, if you see your mind drifting to the things that are like anxiety inducing or whatever, be like, well, this is not the time. Like I just try to like bucket it and put it like actually think of like putting it in like a little bucket and be like, this is going on the back of the head till we go to work tomorrow, because like this is not an issue I need to deal with right now. And literally I can't deal with it right now. It's kind of that concept of like worrying about things in the future that haven't happened yet. It's just like, what's the point? You're suffering in advance for no real reason. So I'm not perfect at it. I'm always thinking about it too. I'd say like maybe the only thing in the last 6 years that has ever turned it off is I had a son. And sometimes I'll be watching him play and that's all I'm actually thinking about. That's like the only thing though. And even then, sometimes I'm not fully present, which I don't like. But that's probably the only thing. But other than that, maybe because like that's the only thing, short of a few other things that I love more than the business. But like, other than that, like as entrepreneurs, I think that's kind of like the curse. Like there's no getting away from it. I would say try to avoid the negative side of it though. If you don't have to deal with it right then, just be like, this is not important to think about.
Got it. Okay, so go have a kid. Noted.
That brings its own challenges. It's like startup number 2. They're absolutely crazy. Yeah, it's been nuts, but it's fun at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that that's like obviously something that founders more than most people are going to experience, is that how do you separate your work life from your personal life? Like Rob said, you are the business. You're not compartmentalizing. That's sort of not your approach. Find techniques to sort of shut the business off, and now you're a personal guy, Rob. That's not something you do.
I don't know, like, it's not my personality. I've always identified like with what I'm doing. Like when I was an athlete, I was an athlete. Like, and now I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur. But I'm not saying that's everyone's strategy. I would say though that if someone's getting into business and wants balance, I would say don't get into business. Don't be an entrepreneur. It's just not like you would become a professional athlete saying like, when I get home from practice that day, I don't want to worry about stretching and doing the ice bath and doing the massage, all the things that suck. They suck. But you have to be doing it 24/7 because like there's no alternative. And this like entrepreneurship, if you actually want your business to make it and be the top 1% of the 1%, you're an Olympian. And do you think Olympians, like, forget Michael Phelps, I think he didn't miss a workout for like 10 years, right? Like 10 years.
Yeah.
And so like, if people want to get in entrepreneurship and have like balance, like power to you, don't expect that you're going to build like the business of like that breaks through then. Like you can build a nice lifestyle business that way. And I'm all for people that want to do that, but they have to be real with themselves that they can't have their cake and eat it too. Because like I think the number one thing entrepreneurs need to do is live in reality. And the reality is this is hard and it takes all your time, and there is the dark periods, and we can talk about them and have strategies to like mitigate them and not burn out, because there's definitely a time and place for like that. However, it's not balance. it's just like strategies, just like athletes need to recover. Recovery is part of the sport, and they're doing it very thoughtfully. It's not just like recovering for them. It's not just sitting and eating a bag of chips on the couch or whatever. It's like it's actually still work, but it's rejuvenative. It's rejuvenate. I don't know whatever word I'm trying to say, but you know what I'm saying. So like that's how I look at it. That's why I say synergy is like if you're going to be in this game and you're going to be in entrepreneurship, it just bleeds into your whole life, and you just make it a part of who you are, and you build strategies, and you find time to be present with your partner or with your child or whatever, but it's never off. Like it's going to be there, especially in the early stages, like until like you've got a team large enough where you can fully delegate everything out, and you can maybe step back a little bit. But that's usually 5 to 10 years out from when you start.
Yeah. And that's so important for people to hear, and I think understand the sacrifice that is going to be involved. When I was in college, I lived with an Ironman athlete, and I'd been an athlete in high school and stuff. And obviously, that it takes hard work, right? But then living with someone who's at that top level and seeing the level of sacrifice that goes into maintaining your spot there is just more than you could imagine. I think
it's delusional. Yeah. It's like, and people will never know. People will never understand unless they've done it. And that's the thing is like, people want to be pro athletes. They want to be entrepreneurs, but like, they don't want to get up and do the work, like a lot of them don't. And that's the beautiful thing about these things is they're permissionless, and you have the ability and the opportunity to go try and do these things. It's so hard. Mm-hmm. It's just incredibly hard. And a lot of people aren't willing to go through the suck for so many years. And the other dark side of it is like the majority of the time it doesn't work out. So it's the combination of like extremely hard work and uncertainty, which is like a dark place. But when it does work, it's great.
So how do you find sort of the limit of your hard work as a founder? I can imagine thinking to myself, I'm doing enough and I don't think that's healthy. Or I could also imagine thinking I always need to be doing more, and I don't think that's maybe healthy either. So is there a way that you sort of find that balance where I'm working hard, but like I'm not on a one-way path to just burning out?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because I think like if you're a high performer, I think the default setting is that you're never doing enough ever. Yeah. I've actually thought about this a lot. I think like as a founder or an entrepreneur, the expectation is that you're doing well from everyone else around you, except in your mind, doing well means just meh, because you always want more from yourself. And then the reality is things are almost never going as well as you want. So you're actually kind of like in a low. So you're either like toggling between low and meh, never actually like good. even though the exterior perception is that you're doing well. And like, it's almost like you can't really talk about it because like, especially if you have a modest level of success, everyone's like, oh, whoa, me, like poor entrepreneur that owns their own business, and makes money, whatever. It's like, yeah, but you don't get it, like it's also really hard. And that's the benefit, Nicole, back to your point of having a network of other people going through it, because you can actually maybe talk a little bit more and have a bit of empathy, where you don't generally, the same thing as if like you heard like a pro athlete complaining, you'd be like, oh, poor you've got all these fans and this great life. Or you hear about a celebrity that has mental health problems, you're like, oh, why would you have mental health problems? It's like, you have no idea the pressure they have. Like, you get, like, the average person gets nervous talking in front of a small group of people. Imagine you had to do that like every day, all the time. It's just like, and these people are humans.
What you just said there like lands, because like the whole thing around like, as a founder, you're always feeling like, man, like we could be doing better, but everyone else be like, oh my God, everything, right. And it actually is like, I found that challenging because it almost like, I just almost feel confused sometimes because it's like, yes, we have accomplished a lot. And like, I'm super proud of everything that we've accomplished, but it's so funny because I almost like, and maybe this isn't a good thing, but like, I almost see all the things that we have yet to accomplish or the things that I can't wait until you know what I mean? Whereas sometimes when you're talking to people and they give you feedback, they're like, they feel like you've already made it. And it's like, no, man, we're just like, we're just getting started. So I've actually found that in conversation anyways, to be kind of difficult because you're right. It's like, you're not going to go there. Like, you're not going to just start like saying all of the woes and the things that you want to achieve, because then it just makes you feel ungrateful or makes you look ungrateful or whatever. So the fact that thank you for saying that, because it like definitely lands.
Well, the other problem with, so you can probably tell I've thought about this a lot. The other problem with like entrepreneurship is that like you're constantly living in the future because you have to be planning 3, 6, 9, 12 months out, maybe sometimes longer. For example, like a few weeks ago, we had our Black Friday meeting. So we're in November in my mind, like full on in November, December. And that's like pretty much the shortest timeline I'm thinking right now. There's other things we're thinking about well into next year. And the problem with that is that you're never enjoying the present. And also when you live in the future, it results in like a high level of anxiety. There's like the other kind of thought that like, if you live in the past, it's depression. If you live in the future, it's anxiety. And the real goal is to live in the present. But that's not a reality for entrepreneurs, is you're pretty much always living in the past or the future. Because you're like analyzing the historicals and maybe depressing yourself a little bit. And then you're living in the future, and then what could be done and what you want to do. And so it's anxiety inducing. So that's like the other curse of entrepreneurship, is like, it's hard to actually enjoy the moments, because like how often can you actually rarely slow down and smell the roses? Not a lot. So anyways, that's the other side of that. I thought about it a lot. Is like, I try to like now just like have like a kind of like a trigger, or remind myself to like, hey, just like recognize this win, because like even if they're small wins, that like I think entrepreneurs and founders don't give themselves enough credit, because it's always on to the next thing. It's like, oh, we made our first $1 million. Cool. What's 5 million look like? What's 10 million look like? What's 25 million look like? And oh, but that guy over there is doing $1 billion. Let's go for that. It's like, there's just never enough, and you're on this like hedonic treadmill and just like never happy. But like life's pretty good at the same time, so you might as well just like smile and be happy. But it's hard to remember to do that.
So do you find that, like both of you, do you find that your anxieties and sort of negative emotions are coming from realities or perceptions more? Like, is it, oh, this number is not good and that makes me anxious? Or is it more like you said, Rob, the projecting the future or thinking about how people are viewing your project or things like that? What do you find?
Nicole, do you want to go first? I've done a lot of talking. I've got an answer, but if you want to,
I would say for me, it's both. If I'm being honest, it's both. It's like in the moment, I find that I want to be achieving more than we are in this given moment, right? And then I'm also a big like visionary type person. So like I have no problem visualizing where we're going to be in 10 years from now. No problem. I could like draw it out. I could spell it out for you. But where I struggle is like working backwards from that and making sure that we're laying down or making all the right moves now to get there. So I think that's very anxiety inducing for me, is it's so clear where I want to get, but I struggle in terms of like, okay, but how do we actually go and get there? And I'm also a very impatient person. And so the patience thing to to trust that we're going to get there and that it takes time. I think that's another reason why I wanted to have this conversation is like, I mean, we all know this, but we don't actually I don't think we actually let it sit with us, is that a lot of these like hugely successful companies, you think that everything was just like this, right? You don't see the grind, you don't see the journey a lot of the time. People aren't documenting that quite as much as the success stories. And so the like whole comparison trap of like, oh my God, well, this person's like so big. I just heard about them a year ago. But if you actually dig, it's like, oh, okay, they've been doing this for 10 years or 7 years or whatever it is. So I find I get sucked into that a lot and need to remind myself to either go and do my research and actually truly see where that person started out or where that business started out. Or just like trust the process. It's hard, but it's like trust the process that we'll get there. But to summarize, I think both.
Mm-hmm.
Both are kind of triggering for me.
Yeah, and to riff on Nicole's point, I'll answer the question after, but like I'm almost in my 6th year. I didn't really start like posting on LinkedIn or Twitter or doing podcasts till like last year. So like almost 5 years in. And I try to be very clear that like everything I'm saying now is because I've lived the experience for 5 years and I've applied a lot of hindsight and done a lot of like thinking on it. And it may sound like I know what I'm doing, but I can tell you in the years of building the business, I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. So unqualified. So like just figuring it as I go, kind of like I don't love fake it till you make it, but like I love the idea of just like being a relentless willingness to figure it out and be confident that you can figure it out would probably be a better saying. So if people listen to any of my recent podcasts or this and be like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. It's like, well, trust me, I did not know what I was doing. And I don't necessarily know what I'm doing moving forward from here. I just know exactly how to like contextualize and explain the past and build some processes to help me in the future. And that's why I say like, I think the number one indicator of like success in business is staying in the game long enough and just like understanding everything and then applying that moving forward. Hindsight's beautiful. Can't change anything you did in the past. So like you're better off just like executing quickly, learning from it. But that's just to build on your point. Yeah. Like people like there's survivor bias. And now like, yeah, we've built a $10 million company or whatever. And it's like, that's great. But like, it was on the back of all these hard stories and tons of hard work and dark times. And like, I just want to make it super clear that like there was not a lot of advantages, a lot of hardship, and like at no point felt like I knew what I was doing. And the actually more freeing thing I've come to know over the last year or so, as I've met a lot of really successful people I've brought into my network, and as I got more vocal about my path, that kind of opened things up. And I've met people that are billionaires and all different phases. And the one thing I can tell you that's true among them all is they're also just figuring it out. And I loved that because it was just freeing. It's like, oh, they don't feel like they've made it. Like, who am I to think like I haven't made it? Like I have so far to go. Like I might as well just enjoy the ride because I'm way away from that. So that was freeing, and just realizing that like I think the thing about entrepreneurship, why it's so difficult, is every time you level up, you're a beginner again. So imagine you're on a staircase. You've never arrived. And the business is an infinite game. So the staircase there's never a top. You've never made it. And there's always someone ahead of you. There's always going to be someone working harder than you or doing something differently. It's just how it is, at least in your mind. And so like you have to kind of get comfortable feeling like you don't know what you're doing, because like, and that's what I mean about like everything I'm saying sounds smart, because I'm 5 years up the staircase, 6 years up the staircase. And so I can talk about all those steps I've taken and sound like I knew what I was doing. But at the time, every step I didn't know what I was doing. And now that's why I say like moving forward, I don't know exactly what I'm doing to take those next steps, but like I'll figure it out because I'll just keep walking. But like I think that's the important thing to realize. It's freeing once you realize that like, oh, these people are human. They're just as flawed as I am. They're still figuring it out. They don't have superpowers. And they also feel insecure and anxiety and all these things. It's like, oh, cool. Like, we're all in this together. Like we can figure it out. So that's like the freeing thing. But the one thing I also have realized is they just think a lot bigger than the normal person. And even bigger than I was thinking at the time. It was just like, I remember sitting down with one person that I met, and a good friend now. And by the time I met him for the first time, I told him, I was all excited. I was like, oh, our business did $5 million. He's like, why not 20? Like immediate response, kind of like very, very, like not a lot of emotion in the face. And I couldn't answer the question. And it was like, I'm generally like pretty like off the cuff. I could talk and I can communicate well and I've thought things through, but that stumped me and I reflected on it. And the only answer I could come up that was satisfying to me was that like, I just wasn't thinking big enough. There was actually no reason why there was a limiting factor. I just thought like, oh, we did 2.5 the year before. Doubling seems reasonable. We've kind of doubled every year before that. But like, that was just a self-limiting idea. It's like, well, what does 20 million look like? So that day, like I kind of like redid the budget and we ended up, doing like $1 million more than we forecasted just because like we just pushed the limits a bit more. And so long-winded answer, but I just think it's really important for people to hear that like no one knows what they're doing. We're all figuring it out. There's always levels to this game. Might as well enjoy the ride. If it's the perception or whatever, if it's in your mind that causes these, I think for me, it's like I hold myself to such a high standard. I think I like stress myself out a lot more than the actual situation does. And so I'm trying to do better at just being like remembering that nothing's ever as good or bad as it seems. And so you just got to like kind of chill out a little bit. But there's some things that happen in business that are just like acute and like there's just no avoiding it. Like we've gone through the co-founder buyout. We went through like a rebrand recently with like legal stuff going on. So like, you can't avoid those anxiety inducing moments. But for the most part, I'd say like a lot of the stress and anxiety is self-imposed.
And something that I've learned this past year, I actually hired a mindset coach because I could just feel myself thinking really small. And it's so interesting. She kind of takes a very similar approach where it's like, she was like, okay, think big. Let's like draft out, what do you want from your business and in your personal life? Like, what is it? And I thought I was thinking like the biggest I'd ever like thought in my life. And she's like, okay, times that by 10. I'm like, wait, so like I need this much more revenue and it was just so interesting how uncomfortable it felt to like even go and think that way. But ever since that lesson, it's kind of just like, it's a muscle that you like, I'm learning that I want to flex more, right. To start thinking bigger. So thanks for calling it out. That's really cool.
Yeah. The other way you could ask that question is, how do I accomplish my 10-year goal in 6 months? So it's like, you generally can't, but it'll force you to do it in like a year or two instead of 10 years. Yeah. So it's like, there's always ways to do these things much quicker and bigger, but yeah, it's been a learning thing for me too. And I think it's just, the exciting thing is that like, you can do it. You can think that big. It's permissionless. It's like, I feel like I've proven to myself 2 times over now with like the sporting career and now getting to this point in business that like, I'd had no right to kind of make it in either of these domains. It just a lot of grit and a lot of hard work and basically an unwillingness to quit, and it can be done. And I think like people need to know that.
Yeah. And you also talked about going up that staircase, right? And every time you get to a new step, you're always back to a beginner again. So what is the process like when you find yourself feeling that way to find your feet? Is it the same every time, sort of the process of how you work through that and tackle that challenge? Or do you find it's always every level, it's a new process or a new approach you have to take?
We give the benefit of all the like experience from the steps before. But also that's like back to Nicole's point of like building a network of people that are like either in the same kind of size business as you or a similar time in the journey, but also people that are a bit further up or further down the staircase as well. As like you can kind of like lean on them for like, oh, well, when you were at this part of your career, like, how did you deal with these issues? And so you can, like you can really start to crowdsource the solutions to a lot of your problems. You can read books about it too. The best books to read for these sorts of things are like biographies, because you can live through their experiences and be like, oh, I want to avoid that landmine. Like that's coming my way. So that's an imperfect answer, but I'd say like the only way to kind of like help front load the learning curve, I guess, or like soften the learning curve would be to like build a network of people that can help you and that have maybe been there before. It's like recently, like we did our financing round, we like raised money last fall. And like the main motivation for me was to now just bring in partners that had a lot more experience than I did. It was like an investment in the business, but also me wanting to like make an investment in just me learning as an entrepreneur and surrounding myself with really smart people. And these like, just like by building a good business at that point, I had like a lot of opportunity to like attract like basically heroes of mine to invest in the company. Now I get to ask them questions and it feels like just insane. And the benefit of that is that like they're able to frame a lot of the things. Like if I'm having a big issue to me, I kind of range to them like, oh, this is just par for the course. You're good. Like, this is fine. Like, here's how you work through it. like the rebrand, like we got kind of a notice that we're getting like a big legal thing, and like it's scary, and it's nothing I dealt with before. And like when I told a couple of our biggest investors, I was expecting them to be like, oh my God, like the house is on fire. And like, oh, okay, no problem. Like, we'll figure this out. Like, it's like, what? You're not scared? Like, you got millions of dollars at stake? And then I guess I shouldn't be scared, Like,
Right.
I'm getting paid to figure this out, and you've got money on the line. So, like, if you're not freaking out, I'm not freaking out. So that's like the real benefit of having people that are further up than you, because like everything in like the other lesson is like almost everything in business is not a death blow. There's some things that are, but like most things are not. And so your job's to basically recognize when they're not, and just don't overreact, because like we're prone to overreacting and getting too anxious or stressed out or whatever, but most things are not. Yeah.
What would you say is like the darkest time or the darkest memory you've had in the stage of growing of your business? And like, if you think back to what that was like what did it feel like? And how'd you work through it?
It would honestly be most recently. So like the rebrand was probably the darkest time. The co-founder buyout was like dark, but at the same time, like it was really like if the business failed at that point, it was just me it affected for the most part. I had like one employee, and that would have sucked, but like the stakes are much lower. The rebrand, like we had a staff of like 25 people. We had 11 investors with like multi-millions of dollars at stake. The brand was doing really well. The business was doing really well. And in my mind, this felt like a death blow. Like I got over that feeling like fairly quickly, but the preceding 6 months, or like the 6 months after like having to go through the rebrand, there was just so many.
Sorry, was the rebrand because there was a legal issue, or it was when you decided to rebrand, you were then faced with a legal issue with the new brand?
No, yeah. So like I can't talk too much, but yeah, basically like the former.
Okay.
So yeah, so like there was an event, and that's what led us on the decision to go through a rebranding process, and it was super scary. But then the work over the next 6 months, and like how do we pull this off? It was just like all consuming, so much legal, so much just like uphill battles I had to do, and it was basically 6 months. And the way I explain it now is like, imagine doing everything physically possible to like work on yourself, like mentally and physically, like eating well and physically taking care of yourself, and like saunas and treatments. I was doing all of those things literally just to not fall apart, not to feel good, just not to fall apart. And so it was just so incredibly, I was basically in like fight or flight mode, and it was
What were you afraid of? Like, what were you scared of when you were going through that moment?
Here's the thing is like, now that I'll say it, like it's hard to articulate, because like rationally it was fine. Like, I had the support of the investors. We had a plan. It was just stressful. It was everything I'd worked for. I was just like, I don't know. I felt such a, I don't know, like, I guess a fear of losing it all, even though that wasn't like really a reality. Like we were going to figure it out. It was pretty apparent, like very early on, like this wasn't a death blow, but it's just like, I just wanted not only to like get through it, I wanted to continue to grow the business throughout it. I guess I put like just way too much pressure on myself, and that's the thing is like, I knew, like, that's the other side of this is like, objectively, I knew like everything was fine, but at the same time, I was just like incredibly stressed out. So, and I just wanted it to go well. And then we launched the rebrand on May 1st. It was really well received. We had our best month of the year, and we're continuing to grow. But like basically from May until like July, like I'm only kind of out of it now. It was like 2 months of just like the most severe burnout, like getting sick all the time, like very, very low lows, like not really knowing what's wrong. I hadn't like felt that like ever. I don't think it was just from that 6 months. It was like an accumulation of not just like the 10 years of athletic career plus the 5 years of the business. And this was the monumental effort that just kind of like was the last straw. And it just took so much out of me, and took a lot of the passion, excitement, and just everything. It's probably like more depressive than anything. And just kind of like, even though everything objectively again was great, like the business was doing great, we accomplished this big thing. It was just like felt pretty like flatlined, really. I feel good now, luckily, but it took a long road to get back. I'm just like, I couldn't exercise as much anymore. Like any like small efforts of like I had to like basically cut off caffeine. Like I had to make so many lifestyle changes just to like not hit rock bottom basically. So, yeah, starting to like get all that back, which is good. But like that was really tough, and like that was a learning experience again of like, back to my original thing of like how entrepreneurs are athletes. It's like we need to act like that and recognize that like the majority of our year needs to be in a relatively base or kind of like tempo. If we're relating it to like running or any kind of training, we need to stay in that kind of like relatively easy zone 1, 2, for almost 98% of the time, because there's going to be some peak moments during the year, whether it's world champs or if we're still talking about sport or Olympics or whatever, that you need to, empty the tanks on. And unfortunately, if you're doing that all year, like I was for 6 months straight, basically, like it leads to a huge decrease in performance. Whereas like you're much better off kind of like thinking through your year and where are the peak moments. For us, that's like Black Friday, and maybe to kick off the year, there's a few other peak moments where it's like all hands on deck and it's going to require like a significant amount of mental effort. And so I draw a lot of these, like I have like a monthly lunch with a sports scientist. I like pick his brain about this stuff. Like how do athletes train? How do they cycle through these things? Because like I just apply it to business, and that's been the learning coming out of this burnout. Is like that wasn't something I should have done. I shouldn't have gone that deep into the trenches. It took way too long to recover. It was damaging. And so I'm now applying these like kind of process moving forward of like, I need to do like a lot of restorative exercise. I need to make sure I'm keeping up with my wellness routines. And like, if something is stressful, just being like, is me dealing with this right now going to solve it? If not, no, okay, I'm taking the day and I'm just going to go like exercise and state change and get out of it and just like make sure I can alleviate these things. But that was probably the darkest time. And like, that's the hard thing. I think you'd ask most people that maybe are going through tough times mentally. It's like once they're out of it, objectively, it was like it was okay. It was just like you just can't get out of it,
Yeah, I actually I recently stumbled across the Midday Squares like podcast, and I actually love like they're sharing stuff in real time, which I find really interesting, and they just like talk about how messed up some things are, and they're just like recounting it in real time, which it's funny because I discovered that after posting on LinkedIn, so I feel like I've put something out into the universe, and it's like all coming back to me now. But yeah, it's always hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, I mean these things aren't uncommon, so I think it's important to talk about them too. It's like the same friend that was like why aren't you doing 20 million? He says I'm gonna misquote. I always misquote him, but he basically says like entrepreneurs have like an anxiety disorder that's harnessed for productivity. So it's like we're not all right. We're just like using it to be like really like productive and functional. And so like I think it's really hard to turn that off. And I think as you meet more entrepreneurs like Nicole, like that we speak the same language, we could be fast friends and talk for hours, I'm sure, because like we live in the same world, because there's so few of us, it's like we talk to my partner will look at me, or like other people, my friends are like, why aren't you more normal? Like what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm just not. And I've had to reconcile that that's just the case. I'm not going to be normal. I'm going to have a harder time enjoying some things than other people. I'm going to maybe be a little less happy in other situations where I'm just like not achieving something. And that's just like my chemistry. I'm working on it. But at the same time, like I question whether or not like if I got rid of those things, would I be as like where I am today? Like probably not. So it's like there's the sacrifice, right? It's just the sacrifice. And that's the benefit again, looping back to having the network of people that are weird and they are not okay or not normal. And you get around them, you're like, oh, we're normal in our own way. It's just like, and that's the same thing with athletes again. It's like they're not normal either. It takes like a pretty delusional mind to want to do what they do. It's not easy. So
you guys are giving me a whole other level of respect for my co-founder. She's sitting next to me right now, so she can hear half of the conversation, but she is also an Olympian and a pro athlete and building this business with me. So she's apparently quite delusional if she's doing all those things at once. So
yeah, she's got a special a love of pain, I must imagine.
Yeah.
And what about you, Nicole? Same question. What's sort of been the lowest moment for you so far?
Honestly, I don't think there's one single moment. I think for me, it's a blur of just trying to penetrate like a very challenging space. Like I think, so obviously, so our company, Tall Size, we're very tall women. So I'm 6 feet, my co-founder is 6'4", the other one's 5'10". And we've struggled our whole lives trying to find clothing that just like fits our bodies. just fits, let alone like expressing ourselves through fashion. All of that has never been an option for us, right? So, and there's a whole slew of other problems that or challenges that tall women face. And I think like the world that we're trying to enter, and which is right now manifesting in the fashion space, but obviously like we've got a much bigger vision for tall size, but for now it's like the fashion world, right? And like nothing is made for tall humans. And so it's like when it comes to manufacturing and producing items and clothing, like the costs are so much higher because they've got to develop new patterns. Like nothing is just off the shelf, right? It's a niche market. So going out and finding these women and figuring out where they are. And then I think tall is one thing, but there's you're tall, but then you also have the whole slew of other different body types as well at the same time. And so there's just, I think, it's just sometimes been, I guess, like demotivating or scary about like no one seems to have cracked this yet. Like no one seems to have like figured this out. And so on some good, like on good days, I'm like, we're the ones to do it. But then on other, like on the bad days, it's like, is this figure outable? Right. So I think that to me is just like the challenging part right now. And Rob, to your point, is like having the grit to just stay in it and know that you'll figure it out. I think that's kind of, I would say that the scariest or the most challenging in my head anyways.
Yeah. And is that the way forward, you think, Rob, or anything else? It just moments of doubt, just pure grit, single-mindedness, and just push through?
I love this quote by Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. It's all mindset. Oof. You might as well just keep going. Like who cares? Just at least you'll be much happier if you just try.
Yeah.
And people, like it's super possible. Everyone I've met that's like truly made it or like is making it or whatever is like they're no smarter than anyone else out there. They're just like they think a lot bigger and they don't give up. And they get smart because they acquire the wisdom and the experiences as they try. And so like they become smart, but I can tell you that they didn't come out of an MBA for the most part, or like they generally probably did poorly in school. I know I did. So yeah, I don't know. I would agree. I'd say like, you don't have the answers. You're a year in, Nicole. There's gonna be many dark moments coming. And that's the other fun part though, is you don't know. That's why like a lot of people said, like, I always get asked, like, if you could go back, what would you change? I would say, like, if I knew what I knew now and went back, I probably wouldn't start. Because like it's just so hard and it's so scary, but at the same time it's so rewarding. So there's a benefit to just being kind of doe-eyed, and you're just like, you don't know what's coming, so it's exciting. And then you can take a unique approach to things. You can truly innovate. And so I always think like that's what the benefit of just starting and like being a beginner and just like figuring out as you go, because like all the best businesses were built by people that were unsatisfied with the way things were done. So why would you dilute yourself with learning how things are done? Just go do it. Just go figure it out. Right. So, yeah, big fan of just trying and just use some of these strategies. Like these would be worthwhile conversations to listen to, of like, oh, okay, like how do I mitigate some of the downsides of the burnout or whatever like that? Those are all things that should be applied. Other than that, just like carve your own way and go for it.
Great advice. And I think that's a great place to end. Almost. We're coming up on time here. So I thought another good way to seal something off is with a plug. So if you guys want to take a second just to tell people where they can find you, what they might find there. Start with you, Nicole.
Sure. Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think is the best place if you want to follow my own personal journey. So just Nicole Murphy on LinkedIn. But if you are listening to this and you are tall or you know tall women in your life, just tell them to head over to tallsize.com.
Perfect. Same thing. I'm active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Twitter's kind of like what I use the most, and then distill that down on LinkedIn, which is still great. And then it's just at Rob Fraser, ROBB Fraser. My middle initials B. I don't actually spell my Rob with two B's, but anyways, and then yeah, our business is outway.com, outway.com. And if anyone wants some awesome looking, very comfortable performance socks, we've got you covered. But yeah, this is super fun. Really appreciate the conversation. It's probably worth a round two at some point because we could probably talk for hours on it. But yeah, happy to continue to share as things evolve. And thanks for having me on. The invite, super fun.
Yeah, of course. It was great to have you both, and thank you both for taking the time. And I think, yeah, it's a great conversation. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, have a good day. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.